They thought they'd broken her, that if they twisted just hard enough, in front of everyone, she'd fold. Because what's a SEAL with only one working arm? But Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr didn't fold. She didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice. She just strapped her arm, walked into the red-lit Reflex Bay that night, and dismantled 4 Marines with just one hand. Now, before we show you what really happened and how one SEAL reminded an entire base what control really looks like, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and stay right here. Because this wasn't about pain. It was about precision. And the moment discipline struck back, the rubber soles squeaked across polished composite flooring. That sound, the one that echoes in every combat bay on every base, bounced off the walls of the Joint SEAL Evaluation Facility like it always did. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Faint smell of disinfectant and old sweat hung in the air. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stood at the front of the formation. 30 mixed branch recruits, half Marine, half SEAL, all waiting. Her right arm hung in a rigid elbow brace, mostly hidden under her training jacket. Subtle, the kind of thing that looked healed enough not to matter, but everyone saw it. Sergeant Cole Braden saw it first, and loudest. He stood near the wall with his arms folded, 3 Marines flanking him like bodyguards, each one taller than her, each one already smirking like they'd been promised a show. Avery didn't raise her voice. Today's lesson is close quarters leverage mechanics. The goal isn't power, it's redirection. Efficiency through angle, not force. One of the Marines shifted. Another coughed to cover a laugh. Braden stepped forward. That's one way to teach fighting, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Another way is to actually fight. Heads turned. Avery didn't. Some of us, Braden continued, come from units where combat isn't theory. You don't redirect weight in an alley. You drop them. Hard, fast, done. Avery blinked once. And yet those who rely on force alone often meet others who don't need to match it to end it. Braden's mouth twisted. Then prove it. Pause. Not dramatic. Just the room shifting. The Marines straightened. The SEAL trainees waited. Avery tilted her head slightly. Volunteers? Braden didn't even hesitate. He motioned to his 3 Marines. Show her what real pressure looks like. She nodded once. Protocol rules. No sustained holds. No head strikes. Rotating pairs. Braden shrugged. If she can handle it. They stepped onto the mat, one by one. The first lunged in with a standard over-shoulder grab. Avery dipped under, pivoted, used his own elbow bend to roll him into the ground. Half a second. He groaned, said nothing. The second moved quicker, slid behind to trap her midsection. She spun on her left foot, hooked his ankle, took him down with one shoulder and a knee, clean. The third hesitated. She didn't. One step, one shift. Mat, no noise, no flourish. Braden's jaw clenched, arms still crossed, but his posture had changed. Avery adjusted her brace, turned back to the room. That concludes the demonstration. The SEAL trainees stood straighter. The Marine stayed quiet. She didn't gloat, didn't speak again, just walked off the mat with the same calm she'd walked onto it. Braden didn't follow, but the words came under his breath, loud enough for his Marines to hear, just loud enough. She'll learn what pressure feels like soon enough. His voice was steady, but his pride bruised. By sundown, the story had already grown legs. In the mess hall, between plastic trays and watery chili, it passed around like contraband. A Navy SEAL instructor walked onto the mat with a brace on her arm, walked off after flattening 3 Marines in under 2 minutes. Didn't even sweat, someone muttered near the coffee. She didn't throw them, another corrected. She placed them, like chess. The tone wasn't awe. It was friction. In the corner booth, Sergeant Braden leaned back, boots up on an empty chair, arms stretched wide. His laugh was sharp, loud enough to cut through the myth before it settled. She ran a demo, not a fight, he said. Those weren't takedowns. They were rehearsed falls. His Marines chuckled, but thinner now. One glanced away when a SEAL trainee passed. Braden tapped his fork against the tray. She teaches combat like a yoga class, breathing and flow charts. She dropped all three, though, one Marine said quietly, then immediately pretended he hadn't. Braden shot him a look. You think she could do that under real pressure, full contact, no safety clause? He didn't wait for an answer. She's brittle, he declared, walking around with a half-healed arm like it makes her some kind of martyr. If it weren't for protocol limits, she'd be out cold right now. Across the compound, in a quiet corner of the operations wing, Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stood at a standing desk. Training log open, the report was dry. Names, timestamps, protocol compliance. But in the margins, she was already drafting adjustments. Asterisk Marine posture imbalanced. Leading foot overcommitted asterisk asterisk. Second attacker favors dominant side grabs. Exploitable on pivot asterisk asterisk. Third shows hesitation under crowd pressure. Freeze predictive asterisk. She didn't annotate emotion, just mechanics. A knock at the glass wall. Commander Ronan Tate stood in the hallway, coffee in hand. You caused a bit of turbulence today, he said as she opened the door. Didn't intend to. I know. Beat. They're whispering already. Half the base thinks you embarrassed the Marines. The other half thinks you got lucky. She didn't react. I'm not interested in luck, she said. Only patterns. Tate studied her a second longer than necessary. Gave a quiet nod. Just keep the brace on. And try not to make any more statements this week, verbal or physical. Avery went back to her desk. She didn't mark anything about Braden in the logs. Not yet. Her restraint spoke louder than any rebuttal could. The next afternoon started with the rhythmic thud of boots on rubber, drills that were supposed to stay procedural. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stood off to the side of the sparring bay, clipboard under her left arm calling rotation changes. Standard endurance circuit, Marines versus SEALs, mixed pairings controlled, timed, safe. Should have been. Sergeant Cole Braden stood near the edge, arms folded, eyes locked on her. He'd been quiet since yesterday. But silence wasn't his nature. It was build-up. When the third cycle ended, Braden called out, Commander Kerr, how about a demonstration? Unless the SEAL manual forbids testing instructors. The jab drew nervous laughs. Avery looked over from her notes. Demonstrations are scheduled, Sergeant. He smiled thin. Then consider this unscheduled. Real-time adaptability drill. Before she could respond, he was already on the mat. Unnecessary, she warned. It's joint training, ma'am, he said, mock formal. We adapt, remember? The room went quiet. Even the air handlers seemed softer. Avery stepped forward, unclipped the pen, placed the clipboard on the table behind her. Protocol first, contact limits. He cut her off. I know the limits. She exhaled slow. Then keep them. They squared off. He was heavier, broader, radiating the kind of confidence built from powerlifting and weekend boxing matches. She moved like water, patient, centered, coiled. He opened with a forward shove, meant to test range. She parried, slipped left, redirected him off balance. The crowd murmured approval. Braden reset, smile thinning. Lucky angle. He lunged again, faster this time. She dropped, caught his arm, pivoted her hip, rolled him over her shoulder. Clean. Technical, controlled. He landed hard. Something flickered in his eyes. He came up fast, too fast. His next move wasn't training. He locked her wrist, stepped inward, twisted, sharp torque, aimed, not at submission, but at humiliation. The kind meant to force a scream, a win, an audience. There was a sound, not a scream, a crack. Every breath in the room stopped. Avery's face didn't change. Her body tensed, then steadied. The brace had taken part of the shock. Not enough. The old fracture line had reopened. She didn't clutch it, didn't flinch. She just looked at him. Expression unreadable. Drill concluded. A medic moved instantly from the side. She lifted her good hand slightly. Negative. No medical intervention required. Her tone carried the finality of an order. Braden stepped back, pretending confusion. Ma'am, that was just contact pressure, standard Marine training sequence. No one answered him. Even his own recruits stayed motionless. Avery bent, picked up her clipboard with her left hand, turned away. She walked off the mat as if nothing had happened. Each step deliberate, posture unbroken. Behind her, Braden stood frozen in a ring of silence, surrounded by witnesses who all knew what they'd just seen, but none who dared say it aloud. He called after her weakly, "Commander, it was an accident!" But the door had already closed, and in that vacuum of noise, the only sound left was the hum of the lights overhead, flickering like they, too, knew something had just crossed a line. By nightfall, the story had splintered. Some said accident, misjudged maneuver under pressure. Others said Sergeant Braden had waited until just the right moment, until Kerr's guard was down, then twisted until something gave. And that sound, that crack, was being whispered through barracks like ghost lore. No one wanted to say they heard it first. Everyone remembered it. In the Marine wing, Braden sat in the locker corridor, sleeves rolled, retelling the version that suited him best. "She didn't tap out," he said with a chuckle. "That's on her." One of his recruits looked uncomfortable. "But that wrist lock, it was part of the sequence," Braden snapped. "Pressure test. Just like the SEALs love. She wanted realism. She got it. Nobody pushed back, but nobody agreed either. Across the compound, the SEALs said nothing. That silence wasn't loyalty. It was containment. Near the equipment cage, 3 SEAL candidates stood in a loose triangle, voices low. One of them, Petty Officer Marsh, had trained under Kerr 2 rotations back. "You know what unit she came from before this?" he said quietly. The other 2 looked at him. "DevGru. Task Unit Raptor. She was part of the extraction team that pulled 6 hostages out of Kandahar in 2019. Firefight lasted 11 hours. She took shrapnel to the shoulder and kept moving." One of the others shook his head. "That's not confirmed." Marsh's expression didn't change. "I've seen the scar, and I've seen what happens when people assume she's just another instructor." The third candidate glanced toward the admin building. "You think she's gonna let this go?" Marsh gave a dry laugh. "She already didn't let it go. She just hasn't shown them yet." They went quiet as a pair of Marines walked past. When the footsteps faded, Marsh added one more thing. "Braden thinks he broke her arm. What he actually did was give her a reason to recalibrate the standard. Back in the Marine wing, the mood was different, heavier. One of Braden's Marines, Corporal Vance, sat on his bunk, staring at his wrapped knuckles from an earlier drill. His rackmate, Jensen, was lacing boots across from him. "You really think it was an accident?" Jensen asked. Vance didn't answer right away, just kept looking at his hands. "I think," Vance said slowly, "he wanted to prove a point. And I think she let him, because proving him wrong later would hit harder." Jensen tied off the last lace. "You sound like you're on her side now." "I'm on the side that doesn't end up flat on a mat in front of the whole base." Vance stood, grabbed his cover, and headed for the door. Before stepping out, he paused. "You see his face after that wrist lock? That wasn't training, that was personal." Jensen said nothing, because they both knew it was true. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr didn't visit medical, didn't file a complaint, didn't even return to her quarters. She submitted a single formal request, time-stamped 1841 hours, addressed to Commander Ronan Tate. Subject, Reflex. Evaluation, authorization, request, restricted use clearance for Reflex Bay, 2100 hours, scope, adaptive demonstration. No exemptions requested. No note about the arm. No complaint. Just protocol. Commander Tate read the request in his office without blinking. He didn't need a second opinion. He'd seen Braden's maneuver from the upper gallery, close enough to know what he did was off regulation, far enough to know nothing would be said unless he said it. He signed the form, forwarded it, closed the file. In the junior officer lounge, murmurs ticked beneath the surface. "You think she's going to report him? She won't. Why not? Because she doesn't need to." Even the Marine recruits who'd been grinning the day before were quieter now. One rolled his shoulder absently, remembering the way she dropped him with just one arm. At 1927 hours, Sergeant Braden sat in the comm room reviewing the day's training logs when his tablet pinged. Official notification. His name at the top. Reflex. Evaluation. Mandatory participation. Time. 2100 hours. Location, Reflex Bay. Instructor, LCDR A. Kerr. He read it twice, then laughed once, short and sharp, but it didn't sound right even to him. One of his Marines looked over. What is it? Braden turned the tablet around. She's running a drill. Tonight. Wants us there. The Marine's face shifted. Not quite fear, something closer to dread. All of us? All of us. Silence. Braden set the tablet down harder than necessary. It's just another demonstration. Probably wants to lecture us on protocol or some garbage. But his voice had changed. The edge was duller now. The Marine stood slowly. You sure about that? Braden didn't answer because he wasn't. They kept watching the clock. 2100 hours was close, too close. And though none of them said it aloud, more than one wondered, what kind of demonstration do you schedule after someone breaks your arm? The rehab wing was nearly empty by 2040 hours. Just the low hum of HVAC and the rhythmic squeak of rubber on polished linoleum. No radio, no voices, just the kind of silence that invites focus. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stood alone beneath a ceiling light that flickered faintly every 7th second. Her uniform jacket lay folded on a bench, her right arm, freshly wrapped in a reinforced compression sling, hung motionless against her torso. Not even a twitch. She was barefoot, balanced. In front of her stood a padded wall and 2 aluminum training dummies stripped down to foam cores. One had a taped X where the neck met the clavicle. The other had a sandbag resting across its lower trunk. Target for leg work. Avery exhaled once, then moved. Left foot pivot, elbow drive, hip hinge, drop and rise again. Every motion, every shift of weight, every redirection was clean, not flashy, surgical. She didn't grunt, didn't breathe hard, but sweat was already rising behind her temples. The sling never moved. She never used the bad arm, not once. She rotated toward the mirror bolted to the corner pillar, paused. In the reflection, her left side looked fluid, dominant now where it hadn't been weeks ago. That wasn't a coincidence. Flashback. Just for a moment. Week 6 of Bud S. Cold surf. Her right hand too swollen to form a fist. An instructor crouching beside her, voice low enough to cut past wind and pain. Your body doesn't decide what works. Command does. Comfort doesn't matter. Clarity does. Back in the present, she whispered it aloud. Not for inspiration, for calibration. Clarity does. She stepped forward again. Left leg sweep, shin trap, reverse stance. She turned her back to the second dummy and let her weight drag it down in silence. She reset everything manually. The dummy, the mat, her footing. Then slowly she crossed to the bench and opened her field log. 2 entries were already written. Below them, she added one more. Reflex, demonstration. Time, 2100. Format, controlled correction. Limits, none. Notes, requests for medical intervention to be denied unless force ordered by base command. She set the pen down. Across the facility, a long mechanical clack echoed as the Reflex Bay doors unlocked. Avery Kerr rolled her sleeve down over the sling, zipped her jacket to regulation height, and walked into the red-lit corridor. Alone, precise, without a backward glance. The next move wouldn't be an adjustment. It would be the correction. The Reflex Bay looked like nothing from the outside. Just a square gray box behind the drone hangars, lit by a single halogen floodlight. But inside, the atmosphere had already shifted. Red emergency lights pulsed low from corner sconces. The floor was bare rubber. The walls were padded foam core barriers set in asymmetrical angles, designed to disorient. At exactly 2100 hours, the facility door opened. Sergeant Cole Braden entered first, flanked by his 3 Marines. Their expressions wavered between amusement and apprehension, unsure if this was payback, protocol, or something else entirely. Commander Ronan Tate stood in the upper gallery with a tablet in hand. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Braden looked up at him. Just want to be sure, sir, this is authorized? Tate gave a single nod. You requested a branch control demo. This is it. Before Braden could respond, the main floor door opened again. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stepped into view. No entrance music, no announcement. She walked calmly across the rubber mat, her right arm strapped firm in a black, immobilizing sling. No longer the rigid brace from before, this was tighter, tactically bound. Her left hand was ungloved, her boots soft-soled, no visible weapons. Braden laughed once, loudly. "You sure you're cleared to fight, ma'am?" Avery didn't look at him. "I'm cleared to demonstrate correction." Tate's voice crackled over the comm. "Reflex Bay live. No gear, no exit markers. Clean protocol, 1 round per contact. Avery Kerr versus Marine unit designated Alpha." The Marines shifted. Avery nodded. "Understood." She stepped forward, slow, centered. Her eyes never moved from the trio ahead. Braden smirked. 3-on-1 again? You remember how this went last time?" She didn't answer, because the first one was already moving. Marine Hash 1 lunged with a front foot grab, classic pressure posture. Avery sidestepped left, caught his elbow with her good arm, dropped him using only the forward momentum of his own weight. His shoulder hit the mat before he even processed it. Alpha 1, neutralized. Tate's voice, dry, factual. The second Marine rushed in more aggressively, going for her upper torso. She pivoted backward, used her shin to sweep his ankle, brought her left elbow across his clavicle in a downward arc. He crumpled. Alpha 2, neutralized. The third hesitated, eyes darting. She moved first. Avery spun on her planted foot, kicked low, caught him behind the knee. He collapsed with a grunt, trying to recover, but her boot was already against his wrist, his arm pinned beneath him. Alpha 3, neutralized. Braden's mouth hung open slightly. She hadn't thrown a single punch. She hadn't used her right arm once. He stepped forward. "My turn." Avery didn't flinch. "Then correct your posture." He charged, faster than the others. Heavy boots slamming down, arms swinging wide. She didn't meet force with force. She bent, low, beneath the swing. Let him overreach. Her left leg swept behind his knee, and she used her body weight to rotate his momentum off axis. He fell hard. Her knee pinned his ribs, her elbow locked behind his shoulder. Her right arm stayed perfectly still, unused, unneeded. She leaned slightly closer. "You wanted proof," she said, voice even. "Consider it logged." She let go, stood, adjusted the sling, backed off. Braden stayed on the floor, breathing hard. The other 3 Marines were still sitting, still stunned. From above, Commander Tate's voice cut through the quiet. "Drill complete. Results recorded. Training directive closed." Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. Avery turned, walked toward the exit, never looked back. Behind her, 4 Marines sat motionless in the red-lit silence of their own underestimation, each one learning the same lesson from the woman who just dismantled them with a single arm. The conference room at Joint Command wasn't used often. Most disciplinary matters never made it that far. But this one had. The next morning, the blinds were shut, overhead lights dimmed, air conditioning running too cold, like the base itself was holding its breath. Commander Ronan Tate sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a single folder open before him. He didn't look angry. He looked surgical. Across from him sat Sergeant Cole Braden, one hand bandaged at the wrist, a slight bruise under his left eye, not from the fall, from the silence that followed it. Beside him were his 3 Marines. No one spoke. At the far end of the table, Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr sat perfectly still, arms still in the sling, face unreadable, no notes, no expression. Tate cleared his throat. "This is not a tribunal. This is a closed review inquiry into training protocol deviation and unreported injury sustained during interbranch drills." He tapped the folder. "Medical submitted its analysis this morning." Braden shifted. "Sir, I already stated..." Tate raised a hand. "You said it was standard contact pressure. I'm aware. Medical disagrees." He opened the folder slowly, read aloud. "Fracture line consistent with direct torque, beyond regulation thresholds. Damage pattern indicative of rotational leverage, not incidental contact. Injury not survivable by bracing alone." Braden's mouth opened, closed. Tate continued. "The angle of the break matched a maneuver banned under Clause 12B of Interbranch Combat Code. You signed the clause. So did every man on that mat." Silence. Braden looked toward his Marines. None met his eye. Tate turned to Avery. "Lieutenant Commander Kerr, Did you report this? No, sir. Why not? Because it didn't require attention. It required adjustment. Tate nodded slowly. So you scheduled a corrective drill? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Tate looked back to Braden. The problem isn't the injury. The problem is the intent. You used a banned maneuver. You justified it under protocol. And you only stopped when your body hit the mat. He closed the file. Effective immediately. You are suspended from instructional duties. A formal reprimand will be filed with both branch liaisons. This base no longer recognizes your authority to lead joint operations. Braden's jaw flexed. He said nothing. The room was too heavy for excuses now. Tate turned to Avery. You'll receive a commendation for adaptive tactical control under duress. Your drill log has already been submitted to Command North for review. She inclined her head slightly. No commendation required. Just forward the next roster. Tate let a faint smile tug at the edge of his mouth. You just reminded this base what control looks like. She didn't reply. Braden looked down at his lap. His hands stayed folded. One of the Marines behind him shifted, ashamed. Tate stood. This session is closed. No one moved for a beat. Then chairs scraped quietly. As they filed out, Avery stood last. Still silent, still composed. Her presence didn't carry weight. It was weight. The door opened. Light spilled across the floor. She walked out without fanfare, and just like that, authority shifted. Not through shouting or punishment. Through precision. The corridor outside the tribunal room was colder than usual. Polished concrete stretched in both directions, interrupted only by wall-mounted schedule boards and a row of metal benches no one ever used. Except now. A handful of officers stood there saying nothing, not talking, just watching. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr stepped through the door without hesitation. Her sling secured, her jacket neatly zipped, not a wrinkle on her uniform. No one saluted. Not because they didn't respect her, because they didn't want to interrupt what had just happened. She passed 2 Marine instructors, neither of them Braden's men, but both had been there yesterday. Both had watched her dismantle 4 bodies with one good arm. They straightened automatically as she walked by. One gave the smallest of nods. She didn't return it, not out of arrogance, out of focus. At the end of the corridor, Sergeant Braden sat alone on the bench. No tablet, no posture, just a man whose pride had been ground down to the reality of consequence. His hands were clasped between his knees, elbows resting forward. He didn't look up. She didn't stop, didn't slow. But just as she passed, his voice caught in the quiet. I didn't think it would snap like that. Her footsteps didn't change, but she did speak. You didn't think I'd keep going either. Then she was gone. Commander Tate stood farther down the hall, arms folded near the elevator bank. As she approached, he didn't move. Just said, you didn't just win. She paused for the first time. You recalibrated the line, he finished. Avery turned her head slightly. Her eyes locked with his for a beat. Then she adjusted her brace with her left hand. Discipline did. She kept walking. The doors opened in front of her. She disappeared inside. Behind her, no applause, no murmurs, just the sound of silence, adapting itself to something new. The sun broke clean across the eastern edge of the base by 0630. Long shadows stretched over the gravel parade grounds. Boots moved more deliberately than usual. The energy had shifted, less noise, fewer jokes, the kind of calm that didn't come from quiet hours, but from something recently corrected. Lieutenant Commander Avery Kerr walked the outer perimeter trail alone. Same posture as always, back straight, gaze steady. Hands tucked behind her lower back, no pomp, no entourage, no medal pinned to her chest. But those who passed her, those who'd seen what happened, stood a touch straighter now, not out of fear, out of recognition. One junior Marine, unfamiliar with her before this week, offered a quiet nod from the opposite walkway. Avery didn't break stride, but returned it with a glance, just enough to say, you're learning. From the barracks walkway, Petty Officer Lauren caught up beside her, adjusting his cap as he matched her pace. Morning, Commander. She nodded. Lorne. He gestured back toward the chow hall. They're real quiet today, even the officers. They'll find their voices again, she said. Hopefully they'll use them better next time. Lorne smirked. Guess they finally learned the first rule. Avery glanced sideways. Which one? He smiled wider. Never touch a seal. She didn't laugh, just gave a single exhale through the nose, like the ghost of a smirk might live there. They walked in silence past the West Range before Lorne peeled off. Avery continued alone toward the central admin block. Inside, Captain Broderick sat on a bench beside the personnel gate. Alone, in uniform, a duffel bag at his feet, a waiting posture, not dismissed yet, but no longer part of anything moving forward. His eyes didn't meet hers as she passed, but his shoulders slouched, with the weight of someone who now understood what he'd struck. She said nothing, no nod, no judgment, no parting wisdom. He wasn't owed it. Outside the instructor wing, 2 new candidates walked by. A pair of fresh officers just cleared for joint training. They didn't know the story, not yet. But they stopped talking when Avery passed, just long enough to notice the silence following her like gravity. She stepped into the staff hallway, paused briefly at the wall-mounted roster, and crossed off the morning's field module with a pen stroke. Done. No lecture, no drill. Just the presence of someone who'd already taught enough. And across the base, the tone of conversation was changing. Not out of fear, but because now they knew. Discipline doesn't mean passivity. It means knowing exactly when to act, and never needing to act again. Would you keep fighting if someone broke your arm mid-mission? Do you think discipline hits harder than retaliation when the whole room is watching? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reminded you what real strength looks like, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, so you never miss the next mission. And share this video with someone who still thinks silence means surrender. Our next operation's already on your screen. Go watch it now. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.